Her billionaire ex-husband bought the building next door, unaware his secret triplets were living nearby. "That's him. The man who was watching our house," Maya exclaimed, pointing directly at the impeccably dressed stranger standing in their doorway. Then, with the directness only a 7-year-old could manage, she looked up at him and asked, "Are you our daddy?" The silence that followed was deafening. Tasha felt her world collapsing as she watched emotions chase across Jeremiah's face. Shock, disbelief, anger, and something that looked almost like wonder. "Yes," he said finally, his amber eyes never leaving Tasha's. "It seems that I am." Have you ever wondered what would happen if the secrets you've kept for years suddenly came crashing down around you? What if the person you've spent years trying to forget suddenly reappeared in your life, not just as a memory, but as your next-door neighbor? I'm Mr. Harrison, and today I'm sharing the extraordinary story of Tasha James, a woman who thought she'd successfully built a wall between her past and present, only to watch it crumble when her billionaire ex-husband unknowingly bought the building next door, to where she was raising their secret triplets. If you've ever had to make an impossible choice to protect the ones you love, this story will resonate deep in your soul. Give this video a like if you believe that sometimes the hardest decisions we make are the ones that define us. Hi, my beautiful sisters. Before I continue with this incredible story, I want to speak directly to your heart for a moment. So many of us have faced impossible choices in our relationships. Moments when we had to decide between staying in a situation that was slowly dimming our light or walking away into an uncertain future. Tasha's journey reminds us that choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's sometimes the most courageous act of love you can perform. When she left her billionaire husband to raise triplets on her own, she wasn't running away from love. She was running toward the kind of love her children deserved. A love that shows up. A love that prioritizes connection over convenience. A love that sees you completely. Whether you're currently struggling in a relationship that's draining your spirit, or you've already made the brave choice to start over, I want you to know that your worth isn't determined by someone else's ability to recognize it. Your value doesn't diminish because someone failed to see it. And your story, like Tasha's, isn't over just because one chapter ended. Stay with me to discover how sometimes life brings us full circle, not to repeat our lessons, but to give us the chance to write a different ending. Now, let's continue with Tasha's remarkable story. The first time Tasha James saw Jeremiah Pierce again, she nearly dropped her coffee mug on the sidewalk. It had been a perfectly ordinary Tuesday morning. She'd been standing on her small balcony, enjoying the early autumn breeze while watching the construction crew that had been working on the abandoned building next door for weeks. The neighborhood was changing, gentrifying, some called it, and the old brick warehouse was the latest project to be transformed into luxury apartments. At 35, Tasha had built a life she was proud of. A successful interior design business that allowed her to work flexible hours. A cozy 3-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood with good schools. And most importantly, 3 amazing children who filled her days with laughter, chaos, and unconditional love. She'd been curious about who might be moving in next door, hoping it wouldn't disrupt the quiet community she'd carefully built for herself and her children. Then a sleek black Bentley pulled up to the curb, and out stepped the last person she ever expected to see. Jeremiah Pierce, her ex-husband, the man she'd spent 7 years trying to forget. Even from 3 stories up, she recognized him instantly. The confident stride, the impeccable tailoring of his suit, the way he surveyed the property with that particular tilt of his head that said he owned not just the building, but the very air around it. Time had been kind to him. His dark hair now had distinguished touches of silver at the temples. His shoulders seemed broader, his presence somehow more commanding than she remembered. Success had polished him to an even higher shine. For one breathless moment, Tasha felt herself transported back to candlelit dinners, whispered promises, and the intoxicating feeling of being the center of someone's universe. Before reality had set in. Before his ambition had eclipsed everything else. Before she discovered she was pregnant with triplets and realized she couldn't raise children with a man who treated family as an afterthought. Then Jeremiah looked up. Their eyes met across the distance, and Tasha saw the exact moment recognition dawned on his face. Surprise, confusion, and something else. something that made her heart race in a way it hadn't in years. She stepped back into her apartment, out of sight, her hands trembling as she set down her coffee. Couldn't be coincidence. The universe couldn't be that cruel. Her phone buzzed with a text from her neighbor, Elaine. Did you see who bought the building next door? Jeremiah Pierce, the tech billionaire. Apparently he's planning to live there himself after the renovation. Tasha stared at the message, a cold dread settling in her stomach. Her ex-husband hadn't just bought the building next door. He was planning to move in. The carefully constructed walls between their lives were about to come crashing down. And he still had no idea he was the father of triplets. Mom? We're going to be late, Zora called from the kitchen, her voice carrying the impatient edge that only a 7-year-old could perfect. Tasha took a deep breath, pushing down the panic. She had built a life for herself and her children, Jackson, Zora, and Maya, brick by brick, without Jeremiah's help or knowledge. She wouldn't let his sudden appearance destroy their stability. Coming, sweetheart, she called back, her voice steadier than she felt. As she grabbed her bag and keys, Tasha caught a glimpse of herself in the hallway mirror. The woman who stared back at her wasn't the same one who had walked away from Jeremiah Pierce 7 years ago. She was stronger now, more confident, the successful interior designer who had carved out her own path. She could handle this. She had to. But as she herded her children toward the door, one thought kept circling in her mind. How long before Jeremiah discovered the truth? How long before he realized that the 3 dark-haired, amber-eyed children living next door were his own? And what would happen to the life she'd built when he did? They had met 8 years ago at a charity gala in Manhattan. Tasha, fresh out of design school and working for a prestigious firm, had been there to network. Jeremiah, already a rising star in the tech world at 30, had been the guest of honor. "You're the only person in this room not trying to impress me," he'd said when they found themselves alone at the bar. "I find that refreshing." Tasha had laughed. "Maybe I don't know who you are." "Even better," he'd replied, his amber eyes warm with interest. "Jeremiah Pierce. Tasha James." "Well, Tasha James, would you like to get out of here? There's a little Italian place around the corner that makes the best tiramisu in the city." She'd hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Lead the way." That night had been the beginning of a whirlwind romance. Jeremiah had pursued her with the same single-minded determination he brought to his business ventures. Private jets to Paris for dinner. Weekends in his Hamptons estate. A proposal after just 6 months, with a diamond ring that made her friends gasp. "We're unstoppable together," he'd whispered on their wedding night. "You and me against the world." For the first year it had felt that way. Tasha had started her own design firm with Jeremiah's backing. They'd traveled the world, made love in exotic locations, talked for hours about their dreams and ambitions. But slowly, imperceptibly, things had changed. Jeremiah's company had expanded rapidly, demanding more and more of his time. Dinner dates were canceled. Weekend getaways postponed. Their conversations grew shorter, more superficial. "I'm building an empire for us," he'd say whenever she expressed disappointment. "This is just temporary. Once the company goes public, we'll have all the time in the world." But the company had gone public, making Jeremiah a billionaire overnight, and nothing had changed. If anything, he'd become more obsessed with work, more distant, more consumed by the next acquisition, the next expansion, the next triumph. The final straw had come on their 2nd anniversary. Tasha had been feeling unwell for weeks. Exhausted, nauseated, emotional. She'd finally seen a doctor, expecting to be told she had a virus or was simply overworked. Instead, she'd received life-changing news. She was pregnant, with triplets. She'd planned a special dinner to tell Jeremiah, imagining his joy, hoping that the prospect of fatherhood might shift his priorities. She'd waited at the restaurant for 2 hours before his assistant called to say he wouldn't make it. An emergency board meeting couldn't be rescheduled. Tasha had gone home alone, the ultrasound pictures still in her purse. She'd found Jeremiah in his home office at 3 a.m., still on conference calls. "I have something important to tell you," she'd said when he finally hung up. Can it wait until morning? I have to review these contracts before the Asian markets open. No, Jeremiah, it can't wait. I'm pregnant. He'd looked up then, surprise registering briefly before he'd smiled. That's wonderful, darling. We'll hire the best nanny in New York. It's not just one baby, she continued, her heart sinking at his response. It's triplets. For a moment, genuine shock had crossed his face. Then he'd frowned. Triplets? That's complicated. We'll need to rethink your involvement in the business. And probably move to the Connecticut house. More space for staff. Not a word about his involvement. Not a moment of wonder at the miracle growing inside her. Just logistics and delegation, as if she'd presented him with a business problem to solve. Is that all you have to say? She'd asked, tears welling in her eyes. What else is there to say? We'll make it work, Tasha. I'll have my assistant research the best obstetric teams tomorrow. In that moment, with perfect clarity, Tasha had seen their future. Her raising 3 children essentially alone while Jeremiah worked 18-hour days. The children growing up with a father who was physically present but emotionally absent. The inevitable disappointments, the missed school plays, the empty seats at birthday parties. She'd made her decision the next morning. She would give him one more chance, one opportunity to prove that he could put family first. She'd asked him to come to the first ultrasound appointment, emphasizing how important it was to her. I'll be there, he'd promised. Nothing could keep me away. But when the time came, his chair beside her had remained empty. No call, no text. His assistant had finally reached him 2 hours later. He sends his deepest apologies, the young woman had said, not quite meeting Tasha's eyes. An unexpected situation with the European merger required his immediate attention. That night, Tasha had packed her bags and left a note on his pillow, along with divorce papers prepared by an attorney she'd contacted that afternoon. I won't raise our children to believe they matter less than a merger, she'd written. I won't teach them that love means always coming second. I'm sorry, Jeremiah, but this isn't the life I want for them, or for me. She'd moved across the country, changed her phone number, and used her maiden name professionally. The divorce had been finalized quickly, with Jeremiah too caught up in his business empire to fight it. She'd asked for nothing except her freedom, wanting no financial ties that might give him reason to stay connected to her life. And for 7 years, she'd succeeded in keeping their worlds separate. Until now. If you've ever had to choose between your heart and your future, hit that like button. And if you believe that sometimes walking away is the bravest thing you can do, subscribe to Timeless Love Tales with Mr. Harrison. The most unexpected part of Tasha and Jeremiah's story is still to come. Jeremiah Pierce stood in the gutted interior of what would soon be his new home, trying to make sense of what he'd just seen. Tasha, his Tasha, living in the building next door. 7 years had passed since she'd walked out of his life without warning, leaving nothing but divorce papers and a hole in his chest where his heart used to be. 7 years of wondering what he could have done differently, of building his empire higher and higher as if success might fill the void she'd left behind. And now here she was, close enough to touch. Mr. Pierce. His project manager's voice pulled him back to the present. About the changes to the east wall. Hold that thought, Marcus. Jeremiah's mind was racing, piecing together implications. The family living next door. What do you know about them? Marcus looked surprised by the question. Not much, sir. Single mother with 3 kids, I believe. They've been here about 5 years. The mother's some kind of designer. Interior designer, Jeremiah corrected automatically, remembering how passionate Tasha had been about her career, even when they were married, how she'd struggled to build her business while he was focused on his own. Yes, that's right, Marcus confirmed, giving him a curious look. Do you know her? Jeremiah turned to stare out the window, toward the building where Tasha now lived. I used to, he said quietly. The coincidence was too perfect to be random. Had she known he was buying this building? Was that why she looked so shocked when she saw him? Or was this some cosmic joke, bringing them back into each other's orbits after all this time? Sir, About the renovation timeline. I want it accelerated, Jeremiah decided suddenly. Double the crew if necessary. I want to be moved in within 6 weeks. 6 weeks. Marcus looked alarmed. But the custom fixtures alone will take. Make it happen, Jeremiah said, his tone brooking no argument. And I want to expand the scope. By the vacant lot on the east side. We'll add a garden, maybe a playground. A playground. The thought came unbidden, surprising even himself. He'd never considered such things before. But something about seeing Tasha again had awakened long-dormant possibilities. As Marcus hurried away to revise the plans, Jeremiah found himself drawn back to the window, staring at the building where his ex-wife now lived. Why had she chosen this neighborhood of all places? Why had she never reached out, even once in 7 years? And why did seeing her again make him feel like he'd been sleepwalking until this moment? One thing was certain. Jeremiah Pierce didn't believe in coincidences. There was a reason Tasha James had come back into his life, and he intended to find out what it was. What he couldn't possibly know was that the truth would shake the very foundation of the life he'd built. For the next week, Jeremiah found himself drawn to Tasha's building like a moth to flame. He told himself he was simply monitoring the construction progress, but his eyes inevitably drifted upward to her third-floor apartment. Sometimes he caught glimpses of movement behind the curtains. Once, he saw a small hand press against the window glass before being quickly pulled away. Tasha had children. The thought still stunned him. In his mind, she'd remained frozen in time, the beautiful, ambitious woman who'd walked away from him without looking back. But she'd moved on, built a life, created a family. Without him, the realization stung more than he cared to admit. After their divorce, he'd thrown himself into work with even greater intensity, expanding Pierce Technologies into a global empire. On paper, he had everything: wealth, power, success beyond what even he had imagined possible. But standing on the sidewalk, looking up at the modest apartment where his ex-wife now lived, Jeremiah felt a hollowness he couldn't quite name. "Sir," his driver's voice interrupted his thoughts. "Your meeting at headquarters starts in 30 minutes. Cancel it," Jeremiah said, making a sudden decision. Cancel everything for the rest of the day. Instead of returning to his car, he crossed the street and entered the small coffee shop that offered a perfect view of the entrance to Tasha's building. He ordered a black coffee and took a seat by the window, settling in to wait. His patience was rewarded 2 hours later when Tasha emerged, accompanied by 3 children. Jeremiah's breath caught in his throat. Even from this distance, he could see they were around 6 or 7 years old. 2 girls and a boy, all with dark hair like Tasha's. Something about them tugged at him, a strange sense of familiarity he couldn't place. The way the boy tilted his head as he looked up at his mother. The animated gestures of one of the girls as she spoke. The determined set of the other girl's shoulders as she marched ahead. Jeremiah watched as Tasha herded them toward the park at the end of the block, her face lighting up with laughter at something one of the children said. She looked happy, complete. The sight should have brought him peace, knowing she'd found what she wanted after leaving him. Instead, it left him with an ache so profound he had to look away. "Mom, you're being weird," Maya declared, narrowing her eyes as she watched Tasha frantically rearrange the living room furniture for the 3rd time that week. "I'm not being weird," Tasha protested, pushing the sofa another inch to the left. "I'm just refreshing the space." "You've refreshed it every day this week," Jackson pointed out, not looking up from his book. At 7, he was the most observant of the triplets, quiet where his sisters were outspoken, thoughtful where they were impulsive. Tasha sighed, abandoning the sofa to sink down beside her son. "I'm sorry. I've just been a little stressed about work." The lie tasted bitter, but she wasn't ready to tell them the truth. Not yet. For the past week, she'd been in a state of constant anxiety, watching the construction next door accelerate at an alarming pace. More workers had appeared. Deliveries arrived at all hours. The renovation that should have taken months was proceeding at breakneck speed, and she knew exactly why. Jeremiah Pierce was a man who got what he wanted, and right now he wanted to move in as quickly as possible. She'd managed to avoid him so far, adjusting her schedule to leave earlier in the mornings and return later in the evenings. She'd started taking the children to the park on the other side of the neighborhood instead of letting them play in the communal garden they'd always loved. But she couldn't keep this up forever. "Is it because of the man who keeps watching our building?" Zora asked suddenly, looking up from her coloring book. Tasha froze. "What man?" "The one in the fancy suits," Zora said, as if it were obvious. "He stands across the street sometimes, just looking up at our windows. Maya saw him yesterday. He was staring at our apartment," Maya added, twirling a dark curl around her finger. A gesture so like Jeremiah's that it made Tasha's heart ache. He looked sad. Tasha felt the blood drain from her face. Jeremiah was watching their building? Had he seen the children? Did he suspect? "He's probably just checking on the construction," she said, trying to keep her voice casual. "The man who bought the building next door is a very successful businessman. Is that why you've been acting so strange?" Jackson asked, his amber eyes, Jeremiah's eyes, studying her face. "Because of the new neighbor?" Before Tasha could answer, a knock sounded at their door. All four of them turned to stare at it, as if they could see through the wood to whoever stood on the other side. "I'll get it," Zora announced, jumping up before Tasha could stop her. "Wait," Tasha began, but it was too late. Zora had already pulled open the door, revealing the very man they'd been discussing. Jeremiah Pierce stood in the hallway, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Tasha's monthly rent. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his posture radiating the confidence of a man who controlled boardrooms with a single word. But his eyes, those familiar amber eyes that she saw reflected in her children's faces every day, were fixed on Zora with an expression of absolute shock. For a moment no one spoke. Tasha felt the world tilting beneath her feet as she watched Jeremiah's gaze move from Zora to Maya, who had come to stand beside her sister, and then to Jackson, who had risen from the sofa. 3 children, all with his eyes, his dark hair, his features softened by hers. "Tasha," Jeremiah said finally, his voice hoarse, "I think we need to talk." Zora looked between them, confusion giving way to dawning realization. "Mom?" she asked, her voice small. "Who is this?" Before Tasha could answer, Maya stepped forward, pointing at Jeremiah with wide eyes. "That's him. The man who was watching our house," she exclaimed. Then, with the directness only a 7-year-old could manage, she looked up at Jeremiah and asked, "Are you our daddy?" The silence that followed was deafening. Tasha watched as emotions chased across Jeremiah's face. Shock, disbelief, anger, and something that looked almost like wonder. "Yes," he said finally, his eyes never leaving Tasha's. "It seems that I am." If you've ever had a secret revealed in the most unexpected way, hit that like button now. And if you're wondering how Jeremiah will react to discovering he has 3 children he never knew about, subscribe to Timeless Love Tales with Mr. Harrison. The confrontation that follows will change all of their lives forever. The conversation that followed was the most difficult of Tasha's life. She'd sent the children to their rooms, promising to explain everything later, though the hurt and confusion in their eyes had nearly broken her. Now she sat across from Jeremiah at her small dining table, the distance between them filled with 7 years of secrets and silence. "Triplets," Jeremiah said, the word falling between them like a stone. "I have 3 children I knew nothing about." "Yes," Tasha admitted, meeting his gaze steadily despite the guilt churning in her stomach. "Were you ever going to tell me?" His voice was controlled, but she could hear the anger simmering beneath the surface. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "I wanted to in the beginning, but then..." "Then what, Tasha?" Jeremiah demanded, his composure slipping. "What possible justification could you have for keeping my children from me for 7 years? I was 3 months pregnant when I left," she said quietly. "You never knew because you were too busy building your empire to notice that your wife was expecting." The words hung in the air between them, sharp and accusing. Jeremiah flinched as if she'd struck him. "That's not fair," he said, but there was less conviction in his voice now. Isn't it? Tasha leaned forward, years of pent-up hurt spilling out. You missed our anniversary dinner because of a business meeting. You forgot my birthday 3 years in a row. When I told you I wasn't feeling well, you sent your assistant to check on me instead of coming home yourself. I was building something for us. No, Tasha cut him off. You were building something for yourself. I was just an accessory. A trophy wife who was expected to smile at your galas and then wait patiently at home while you chased the next deal, the next acquisition, the next billion. Jeremiah ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration she remembered well. So you punished me by taking my children away? By denying me the chance to be their father? I was protecting them, Tasha said quietly. I grew up with a father who was physically present but emotionally absent. I watched my mother wither away, always hoping he would notice her, appreciate her. I couldn't do that to my children. I couldn't let them grow up feeling like they were never enough for their father's attention. Something shifted in Jeremiah's expression then. A flash of pain, quickly masked. You didn't give me the chance to prove you wrong. Would you have taken it? Tasha asked. If I had told you I was pregnant with triplets, would you have changed? Would you have put family before business? Even once. The silence that followed was answer enough. Jeremiah stood abruptly, pacing the small living room. I want to meet them properly. To talk to them. It's not that simple, Tasha said. They've just had their world turned upside down. They need time to process. Time. Jeremiah's laugh was bitter. You've taken 7 years from us already, and now you want more time? This isn't about you or me, Tasha said firmly. It's about Jackson, Zora, and Maya. They're children, not pawns in whatever game you think we're playing. Jeremiah stopped pacing, his expression softening slightly at the mention of their names. Jackson, Zora, and Maya, he repeated, as if testing how they felt on his tongue. Yes, Tasha said. Jackson is the oldest by 4 minutes. He's thoughtful, brilliant with numbers, loves astronomy. Zora came next. She's our artist, passionate about everything, feels things deeply. And Maya is our fearless one, always asking questions, always pushing boundaries. She watched as Jeremiah absorbed this information, saw the hunger in his eyes for more details, more glimpses into the lives he'd missed. They have your eyes, she added softly. All 3 of them. Something vulnerable crossed Jeremiah's face then, a crack in the armor of the billionaire CEO. I want to know them, Tasha. I need to. Tasha sighed, knowing this moment had been inevitable from the second she'd seen him step out of that Bentley. We'll take it slowly, on their terms, not yours. And if at any point they're uncomfortable. I understand, Jeremiah interrupted, an unexpected humility in his voice. I'll follow your lead on this. But I'm not going anywhere, Tasha. Not this time. As he moved toward the door, he paused, turning back to her with an intensity that made her breath catch. For what it's worth, I've thought about you every day for 7 years. About what I lost. About what I would do differently if I ever got a second chance. Before she could respond, he was gone, leaving Tasha alone with the weight of the past and the uncertainty of the future. From down the hallway came the sound of a door opening, and then Zora's voice, small but determined. Mom, we want to know everything. Right now. Tasha took a deep breath, preparing to have the conversation she'd been dreading for 7 years. It was time for the truth, all of it. The children sat on Tasha's bed, 3 solemn faces watching her with expressions that ranged from confusion to hurt to curiosity. Jackson, ever the analytical one, had his arms crossed defensively. Zora's eyes were red-rimmed, as if she'd been crying. Maya simply looked thoughtful, her head tilted in that way that had always reminded Tasha of Jeremiah. That man, Tasha began carefully, is Jeremiah Pierce. He's your father. Why didn't you tell us about him? Jackson asked, his voice tight with emotion. Why did you say our daddy was gone? I never said he was gone, Tasha corrected gently. I said he wasn't part of our lives, and that was true. But why? Zora pressed, tears welling in her eyes again. Didn't he want us? The question pierced Tasha's heart. This was exactly what she'd feared, that her children would believe they weren't wanted, that they weren't enough. He didn't know about you, she admitted. I left before I told him I was pregnant. Why would you do that? Maya asked, her directness cutting straight to the heart of the matter. Tasha chose her words carefully, wanting to be honest without demonizing Jeremiah. Your father and I were married for 2 years. He was very focused on his work. Building his company was the most important thing in his life. When I found out I was pregnant with you 3, I realized I needed a partner who would put family first. Someone who would be there for school plays and bedtime stories and scraped knees. And he wouldn't have done those things? Jackson asked. I didn't believe he would, Tasha said. I might have been wrong, but at the time, I made the decision I thought was best for all of us. Is he rich? Maya asked suddenly. He wears fancy clothes like the dads on TV. Despite everything, Tasha smiled. Yes, he's very successful. He owns Pierce Technologies, the company that makes the tablets we use at school. Jackson's eyes widened. That's our dad. Yes, Tasha nodded. That's your dad. And now he lives next door? Zora asked, looking bewildered by this turn of events. He's renovating the building next door, Tasha confirmed. It's a coincidence. He didn't know we lived here. But now he knows about us, Maya said. Will we get to see him again? Tasha looked at each of their faces, seeing the mixture of hope and uncertainty there. If you want to, she said carefully. This is new for all of us, including your father. We'll need to take things slowly. I want to see him, Maya declared immediately. Me too, Zora added, though with more hesitation. Jackson remained silent, his amber eyes, so like Jeremiah's, troubled. Did he seem mad? He finally asked. About not knowing about us? He was surprised, Tasha said honestly. And yes, a little angry with me. But mostly, I think he was sad about missing so much of your lives. Will he try to take us away? Jackson's question revealed the fear behind his reserve. No, sweetheart, Tasha assured him, pulling him close. This is your home. Nothing is going to change that. Your father just wants to get to know you. As she held her son, Tasha hoped she was telling the truth. The Jeremiah she'd known 7 years ago might well have used his wealth and power to try to take control of the situation. But the man who had stood in her living room today, who had agreed to follow her lead, seemed different somehow. Humbled, perhaps, by the discovery of his children. Or maybe that was just wishful thinking. Jeremiah stood in the center of his half-finished penthouse, surrounded by construction dust and the skeletal framework of what would soon be luxury, but seeing none of it. His mind was filled with images of 3 children, his children, their faces a perfect blend of Tasha's features and his own. Children he hadn't known existed until today. The anger he'd felt initially had given way to a more complex emotion, a profound sense of loss for the years he couldn't get back, mixed with an almost desperate desire to make up for lost time. Mr. Pierce. Marcus appeared at his elbow, tablet in hand. The contractors need decisions on the kitchen finishes and change the plans, Jeremiah interrupted, his mind racing ahead. The East Wing, make it 3 bedrooms instead of the home office and library, each with its own bathroom. And I want to see designs for a game room, something that would appeal to 7-year-olds. Marcus blinked in confusion. Sir, I have children, Marcus, Jeremiah said, the words still strange on his tongue. 3 of them. They're 7 years old, and they live next door. I see, Marcus said, though clearly he didn't. Congratulations. It's complicated, Jeremiah said, running a hand through his hair. I just found out today. Their mother is my ex-wife. Understanding dawned on Marcus's face. The interior designer? Yes, and I want this place to be somewhere they'll feel welcome. Somewhere they might want to spend time. Of course, sir. I'll have the architects revise the plans immediately. As Marcus hurried away, Jeremiah walked to the window, staring out at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the dusk. 7 years. He'd missed 7 years of his children's lives. First steps, first words, first days of school. All gone, moments he could never reclaim. The rational part of him understood why Tasha had left. He had been obsessed with building Pierce Technologies, convinced that success would justify any sacrifice. Looking back now, he could see how he'd neglected her, how he'd taken for granted that she would always be there, waiting patiently while he conquered the business world. But to keep his children from him, that was harder to forgive. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was his executive assistant, reminding him about the board meeting scheduled for the following morning. "Cancel it," Jeremiah said without hesitation. "In fact, clear my schedule for the rest of the week." "Sir," the assistant sounded alarmed. "The quarterly projections can wait," Jeremiah finished firmly. "Something more important has come up." As he ended the call, Jeremiah realized it was the first time in his career he'd ever prioritized anything over business. The irony wasn't lost on him, that it had taken discovering he was a father to 3 7-year-olds to finally make him understand what Tasha had been trying to tell him all those years ago. Some things mattered more than the next deal, the next acquisition, the next billion. The question was whether it was too late to prove that to her, and to their children. 3 days later, Tasha stood nervously in the small park near their apartment building, watching as Jeremiah approached. He looked different today, more approachable in jeans and a simple button-down shirt, though she suspected both cost more than her entire wardrobe. The children waited beside her, dressed in their favorite weekend clothes. Jackson in his NASA t-shirt, Zora in her purple dress with stars, Maya in overalls and a striped shirt. They'd been uncharacteristically quiet all morning, the weight of this meeting affecting even Maya's usual exuberance. "Hello," Jeremiah said as he reached them, his eyes moving hungrily over the children's faces. "Thank you for agreeing to this. We thought the park might be a good place to start," Tasha said. "Neutral ground." Jeremiah nodded, then crouched down to the children's level. "I'm very happy to meet you properly," he said, his voice gentler than Tasha had ever heard it. "I know this is strange for all of us. Did you really not know about us?" Zora asked, getting straight to the point. "No, I didn't," Jeremiah answered honestly. "If I had, I would have been part of your lives from the beginning." "Mom says you were busy with your company," Jackson said, his tone slightly accusatory. "I was," Jeremiah admitted. "Too busy. I made mistakes that I very much regret now." "Do you make tablets?" Maya asked, changing the subject with the mercurial attention span of a 7-year-old. Jeremiah smiled, clearly relieved by the simpler question. "My company does, yes, among other things. We use them at school," she informed him. "They're pretty cool." "Thank you," Jeremiah said, his smile widening. "Maybe someday you could visit my office and see how they're designed." Maya's eyes lit up. "Really? If your mother agrees," Jeremiah added quickly, glancing at Tasha. "We'll see," Tasha said, not wanting to make promises either way. "Why don't we start with the playground? The children can show you their favorite equipment." What followed was the most surreal afternoon of Tasha's life. Watching Jeremiah Pierce, Billionaire CEO, push their daughters on the swings. Seeing him listen with genuine interest as Jackson explained the constellations he could identify in the night sky. Observing the careful way he responded to their questions, never talking down to them, never dismissing their concerns. It was like seeing a different man than the one she'd been married to, or perhaps glimpsing the man he might have become if things had been different. "He's not what I expected," Tasha admitted to her friend Elaine over coffee the following week. "He's actually good with them. People can change in 7 years," Elaine pointed out, "especially after losing something important to them." "Maybe," Tasha conceded, "but I'm still not sure I trust it." "What happens when the novelty wears off? When board meetings and business trips start calling again?" "I guess you'll find out," Elaine said. "He's not going anywhere, is he?" "No," Tasha sighed. "The renovation next door is almost complete, and he's been seeing the children twice a week. They're already getting attached." "And what about you?" Elaine asked perceptively. Are you getting attached again too? Tasha looked away, unwilling to examine the complicated feelings that had been stirring since Jeremiah had re-entered her life. It's not about me. It's about what's best for the children. But later that night, as she stood on her balcony looking at the lights glowing in Jeremiah's newly completed penthouse, Tasha couldn't help wondering if she was being entirely honest with herself. The Jeremiah she'd known had been brilliant, charismatic, and utterly self-absorbed. The man who now spent hours building Lego structures with their son, who patiently taught their daughters how to fly kites in the park, who looked at all three children with a mixture of wonder and regret. That man was someone she might have stayed with, someone she might have built a life with. But was the change real? Or would he eventually revert to the workaholic who had broken her heart once before? As if sensing her thoughts, her phone buzzed with a text from Jeremiah. The children mentioned you have a big design presentation tomorrow. Good luck. I always knew you'd be successful on your own terms. The simple message, acknowledging her career without trying to take credit for it, touched something deep inside her. Maybe people really could change. Maybe second chances were possible. Or maybe she was setting herself up for another heartbreak. 6 weeks after Jeremiah's dramatic re-entry into their lives, Tasha found herself standing in his penthouse, supervising as the children explored their new rooms. Despite her initial reservations, she had to admit that Jeremiah had been thoughtful in creating spaces for them. Jackson's ceiling was painted with constellations that glowed in the dark. Zora's room had an art corner with supplies that would make professional artists envious. Maya's was filled with books and puzzles that challenged her curious mind. What do you think? Jeremiah asked, coming to stand beside her as they watched the children exclaim over their discoveries. It's beautiful, Tasha admitted. You've put a lot of thought into it. I had 7 years to make up for, he said quietly. And I know it's just a start. Tasha turned to look at him, really look at him, for the first time in weeks. The arrogance she remembered was gone, replaced by something more grounded, more authentic. His eyes, when they met hers, held a warmth that made her breath catch. Why did you really buy this building? She asked suddenly. Was it truly coincidence? Jeremiah hesitated, then shook his head. Not entirely. I didn't know you lived next door, but I knew you were somewhere in this city. I'd been looking for you for years, Tasha, discreetly through private investigators. Why? She whispered, her heart racing. Because I realized what I'd lost when you left. Not just a wife, but a partner. Someone who saw me clearly, who challenged me to be better. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of vulnerability she remembered well. I threw myself into work after you left, thinking success would fill the void. Didn't. Nothing did. And now? Tasha asked, almost afraid of the answer. Now I have a second chance I never expected. Not just with you, but with 3 amazing children I never knew I wanted until I met them. He took a step closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. I'm not asking for anything, Tasha. Just the chance to be in their lives. To be the father they deserve. Before she could respond, Maya came running over, her eyes bright with excitement. Mom, Dad says we can have dinner here tonight. Can we? Please, Dad. The word hung in the air between them, simple yet profound. In just 6 weeks, Jeremiah had gone from stranger to father in their children's eyes. And in Tasha's heart, something long dormant had begun to stir again. Yes, she said, her eyes never leaving Jeremiah's. We can stay for dinner. Later that evening, as they sat around Jeremiah's dining table, the children chattering excitedly about their new rooms and the playground being built in the garden below, Tasha found herself watching the man across from her with new eyes. The Jeremiah she'd married had been driven by ambition, by the need to prove himself to the world. This Jeremiah, the one who listened patiently as Zora described her latest art project, the Jeremiah she'd married had been driven by ambition, by the need to prove himself to the world. This Jeremiah, the one who listened patiently as Zora explained her artwork, who helped Jackson with his science project without checking his phone once, who remembered that Maya was allergic to strawberries without being reminded. This man seemed to understand what truly mattered. After the children had gone to bed in their new rooms, insisting they wanted to stay the night, Tasha found herself alone with Jeremiah on his expansive terrace overlooking the city lights. "They're happy here," she said softly, watching him through the reflection in the glass door. "I want them to be happy everywhere," Jeremiah replied. "With you, with me, with us together if that's ever possible again." Tasha turned to face him directly. "Is that what you want? Us together again?" "I've had 7 years to think about what I lost," Jeremiah said, taking a step closer. 7 years to realize that all the success in the world means nothing if you have no one to share it with. "I built an empire, Tasha, but it's empty without a family to fill it." "People don't change that easily," she said, though her resolve was weakening. "How do I know this isn't temporary? That once the novelty wears off, you won't go back to 18-hour days and missed dinners?" "Because I've already changed," he said simply. "The day you left, something broke in me. I kept working, kept building, but I was going through the motions. Nothing filled the void you left. And now, knowing what I missed with our children," his voice caught, "I won't make that mistake again. I can't." "I'm scared," Tasha admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not just for me, but for them. They're already falling in love with you. If you disappoint them—" "I won't," Jeremiah promised, reaching for her hand. "Test me, challenge me, hold me accountable. But please, Tasha, give us a chance to be the family we should have been from the beginning." She looked down at their joined hands, feeling the familiar warmth of his touch. "It won't be easy. We're different people now." "Maybe that's a good thing," he said with a small smile. "Maybe we needed to grow separately before we could grow together." A sound from inside drew their attention. Maya standing in the doorway in her pajamas, watching them with curious eyes. "Are you and Daddy going to get married again?" she asked, her directness making both adults laugh despite the tension. "It's not that simple, sweetheart," Tasha began. "Why not?" Maya persisted. "You like each other. We like having a daddy. And he has a really big house with a pool they're building downstairs." "Is that all it takes?" Jeremiah asked, amusement dancing in his eyes. "A big house and a pool? And ice cream," Maya added seriously. "Lots of ice cream." "I think we can manage that," Jeremiah said, crouching down to her level. "But your mom and I need some time to figure things out. Grown-up things are complicated sometimes." "That's what Mom always says," Maya sighed dramatically. "Grown-ups make everything complicated." After tucking Maya back into bed, they returned to the terrace. The moment between them shifted by the child's innocent question. "She has a point," Jeremiah said softly. "Maybe we are making this more complicated than it needs to be. Or maybe she's simplifying something that isn't simple at all," Tasha countered. "We have history, Jeremiah. Pain. Trust that needs to be rebuilt." "Then let's rebuild it," he said, taking her hands in his. "Day by day. I'm not asking for everything at once. Just a chance to prove that what I feel for you, what I've always felt for you, is real." Tasha looked into his eyes, the same amber eyes that her children had inherited, and saw something she'd never seen during their marriage. Vulnerability, openness, a willingness to risk everything for a second chance. "One step at a time," she finally agreed. "For the children's sake." "For all our sakes," Jeremiah corrected gently, and before she could respond, he leaned forward and brushed his lips against hers. A kiss so tender, so filled with promise and hope, that Tasha felt tears spring to her eyes. When they pulled apart, she saw her own emotions reflected in his face. Wonder, hope, and the tentative beginnings of trust. "One step at a time," she repeated, but this time with a smile. 3 months later, Tasha stood in her apartment, surrounded by moving boxes. The children were racing between rooms, excited about the big move next door. "Mom, Dad says we can paint the game room any color we want," Zora called, her artistic mind already planning elaborate murals. "Within reason," Tasha called back, exchanging an amused glance with Jeremiah, who was carefully wrapping her favorite vase in bubble wrap. "You know, we could have hired people to do this," he pointed out, not for the first time. And missed the joy of watching a billionaire CEO struggle with packing tape? Tasha teased. Never. Jeremiah laughed. The sound warm and relaxed in a way it had never been during their first marriage. These past months had been a revelation. Watching him prioritize family dinners over board meetings, seeing him coach Jackson's little league team despite knowing nothing about baseball, observing the genuine joy he took in simply being present with their children. And with her, they'd taken things slowly, rebuilding trust through actions rather than words. Date nights where his phone remained off. Family weekends where work wasn't mentioned. Honest conversations about their past mistakes and their hopes for the future. It hadn't been perfect. There had been arguments, misunderstandings, moments when old wounds reopened. But through it all, Jeremiah had remained steadfast in his commitment to putting their family first. "What are you thinking about?" he asked now, catching her thoughtful expression. "How different things are this time," she said honestly. "How different you are. How different we both are," he corrected, setting down the wrapped vase to pull her into his arms. "You're stronger now, more willing to tell me when I'm being an idiot." "You were always an idiot," she said with a smile. "You just didn't know it." "True," he acknowledged with a laugh. "But I'm learning." From the doorway came the sound of exaggerated gagging. "They're being mushy again," Maya announced to her siblings, who had appeared behind her. "Gross," Jackson agreed, though his smile betrayed him. "I think it's romantic," Zora declared, ever the dreamer. Jeremiah released Tasha with a laugh, but kept one arm around her waist. "How about we take a break from packing and get some ice cream?" "Yes," the children chorused in unison. As they headed out the door, Tasha paused to look back at the apartment that had been their sanctuary for so many years. The place where she'd raised her children alone, never imagining that one day their family would be complete. "Having second thoughts?" Jeremiah asked quietly, reading her expression. "No," she said, squeezing his hand. "Just grateful for second chances." He pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "So am I. Every single day." Outside, the children raced ahead toward the ice cream shop on the corner, their laughter floating back on the autumn breeze. Tasha and Jeremiah followed more slowly, hands intertwined, the future stretching before them. Not perfect, perhaps, but full of promise. Sometimes, Tasha reflected, the universe knew exactly what it was doing when it placed a billionaire ex-husband in the building next door. If you've ever believed in second chances or the power of love to transform us, hit that like button. And if you want to hear more stories about families finding their way back to each other against all odds, subscribe to Timeless Love Tales with Mr. Harrison. Remember, sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about finding someone new. They're about rediscovering what was always meant to be.